"Give him the junk," Cousin Richard said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Maybe the old soldier can sleep inside it." A thin ripple of laughter moved through Aunt Eleanor's parlor, soft at first, then crueler when no one tried to stop it. Daniel Cross stood near the back wall, with one hand resting on the worn leather harness of Soldier, his 6-year-old German shepherd, and said nothing. The rain outside tapped against the tall windows like patient fingers, blurring the gray afternoon beyond the glass. The house smelled of lemon polish, cold ashes, and lilies that had been left too long in their vase. At the center of the room, the attorney sat behind Eleanor's cherrywood desk, sorting through pages of the will, while the family leaned forward as if every sheet might breathe out money. Cash accounts had already been named: savings bonds, a lake lot upstate, a box of jewelry, 2 antique watches. Every time another relative heard their name, their face warmed with victory, then tightened with fear that someone else might receive more. Daniel watched it all with the quiet stillness of a man who had learned, in harder places than this, that wanting too loudly could make a person look smaller. He had not come for money. He had come because Eleanor Cross had once mailed him letters when he was stationed far from home, letters written in blue ink on cream paper, always ending with the same line: "Come back kind, Danny, even if the world does not." Soldier shifted beside him. His ears rose, sharp and alert, aimed not at the attorney, not at the whispering cousins, but toward the closed hallway door that led down to the basement. Daniel felt the change immediately. Soldier did not move without reason. The dog's amber eyes fixed on that door as if something behind it had called his name in a voice too low for human ears. The attorney cleared his throat. "To my nephew, Daniel Cross," he read, and the room became suddenly interested again. "I leave the standing. Walnut armoire stored in the basement utility room, along with the brass key taped beneath the left rear foot." For one breath there was only rain. Then Richard laughed. "That old thing? She tried to give it to Goodwill twice, and they wouldn't take it." Someone else muttered, "Figures." Daniel felt heat move through the room, not from the fireplace, but from satisfaction. They had expected him to be wounded by it. Instead, he looked down at Soldier, whose body had gone perfectly still. Then the dog gave 3 short barks, clean and deliberate, each one landing in the silence like a knock on a locked door. The attorney frowned. Richard rolled his eyes, but Daniel knew that sound. He had heard Soldier make it only when something hidden had decided it no longer wanted to stay hidden. Daniel waited until the laughter faded before he stepped toward the attorney's desk. "May I have the key, sir?" he asked. His voice was low, steady, almost too calm for the room. The attorney, Mr. Holloway, looked relieved to hear a civil word. He opened a small paper envelope and tipped a tarnished brass key into Daniel's palm. "Your aunt was very specific," he said. "She wanted you to collect the armoire today, before anyone else left the property." Richard leaned back in his chair with a grin. "Afraid we might steal firewood?" Daniel closed his fingers around the key. "No," he said quietly. "She was afraid you would not understand what mattered to her." The room tightened. A woman near the mantel gave a small scoff, but no one answered. Soldier stood, his nails clicking once on the polished floor, eyes still locked on the hallway. "Easy, boy," Daniel murmured. The dog did not relax. Mr. Holloway gathered the remaining papers, then looked toward the family. "Mrs. Cross also left instructions that no one is to enter the basement except Daniel and myself." "That is ridiculous," Richard snapped. "This is still a family house." "For the next 48 hours, the attorney replied. "It is a house under probate supervision," and those were her instructions. Daniel followed him through the hallway, past framed photographs of people who had smiled better in black and white than they ever had in life. The farther they walked, the colder the air became. At the basement door, Soldier pressed forward, nose working, ears high. Daniel paused with his hand on the knob. A memory rose, soft as dust in a sunbeam. Eleanor, small and straight-backed in her blue cardigan, standing beside that same basement door 2 summers earlier. "Do you know why old furniture lasts longer than people, Danny?" she had asked. Daniel had been fixing a loose porch rail, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. "Because it does not argue," he had said. Eleanor had laughed, the kind of laugh that made her silver hair tremble. "Because it keeps what others forget." Now, as Mr. Holloway opened the door, that sentence returned with a weight Daniel had not felt before. The basement smelled of stone, cedar, and old rain. A single bulb hummed overhead. In the far corner, beneath a white sheet yellowed by time, stood the armoire. It was taller than Daniel remembered, nearly 7 feet, broad-shouldered in its own strange way, made of dark walnut that drank the light instead of reflecting it. Soldier walked straight to it, not wandering, not sniffing the shelves or boxes, but going to the left rear foot as if he had been given directions. "That is unusual," Mr. Holloway whispered. Daniel crouched beside the dog. What do you have, soldier? Soldier touched the wooden foot once with his paw. Daniel reached under it and felt tape, brittle with age. He peeled it free. A second key lay hidden there, smaller than the first, blackened at the teeth. Mr. Holloway drew in a slow breath. I was not told about that one. From upstairs came Richard's muffled voice, impatient and sharp. Are you two done admiring the trash? Daniel looked at the armoire, then at Soldier, whose amber eyes did not blink. Somewhere inside the old wood, something gave a faint, careful click. The sound was so small that Mr. Holloway seemed to wonder if he had imagined it, but Soldier had not. The German shepherd stepped back from the armoire, then sat squarely in front of it, his body straight, his ears forward, his gaze fixed on the lower doors. Daniel knew that posture. It was not fear. It was certainty. He wants it opened, Daniel said. Mr. Holloway adjusted his glasses. Then perhaps we should open it carefully. Daniel slid the tarnished brass key into the main lock. The metal resisted at first, stiff with years of disuse, then turned with a dry whisper. The doors opened slowly, breathing out the smell of cedar, old cloth, and lavender sachets long gone faint. Inside hung nothing but 2 empty wooden rods, a cracked mirror on the inner door, and 12 small drawers along the bottom, each with a round brass pull. Richard's voice came down the stairwell again. You finding gold in there yet? Daniel did not look back. No, he called. Just patience. Mr. Holloway pressed his lips together as if hiding a smile. Soldier rose and pushed his nose toward the drawers, stopping at the 6th, then the 9th, then the 12th. Daniel opened each one. They were empty except for dust and a few brittle sewing pins. Maybe she really did leave you nothing, Mr. Holloway said, not unkindly. Daniel ran his thumb along the drawer rails. Aunt Eleanor never wasted words. She would not waste wood either. Soldier gave one soft bark and tapped the left side panel with his paw. Daniel leaned closer. There, beneath the dust, was a faint line carved into the walnut, nearly invisible unless the light struck it sideways. It was not decoration, it was a seam. He took out the smaller blackened key and searched for a lock, but found none. Mr. Holloway bent beside him. That panel is solid. It sounds solid, Daniel replied. That is different. He knocked gently along the wood. The first 3 taps were dull. The 4th carried a hollow note, deep and clean, like a secret answering from behind a wall. Soldier's tail moved once. Daniel felt along the carved trim until his fingertip caught on a tiny notch shaped like a half-moon. He pressed it. Nothing happened. He pressed harder. Still nothing. Then Soldier lowered his head and nudged Daniel's wrist toward the cracked mirror inside the door. What is it, boy? Daniel whispered. In the mirror's cloudy surface, he saw the armoire from a different angle, and for the first time noticed that one carved rose in the upper corner was facing the wrong direction. Daniel reached up, twisted the rose, and the left side panel released with a soft click. Mr. Holloway stepped back, pale with surprise. Mrs. Cross never mentioned a hidden compartment. Daniel opened the narrow panel. Inside was not money, not jewelry, not anything the family upstairs would have fought over. There was only a cream envelope tied with blue ribbon, the same shade Eleanor had used on every letter she had ever sent him. On the front, in her careful handwriting, were 6 words. Daniel, let Soldier show you first. Daniel did not open the envelope right away. He held it in both hands, feeling the slight bend of the paper, the raised edge of Eleanor's handwriting, the strange quiet that had settled over the basement like snow over a field. Mr. Holloway looked toward the stairs, where footsteps shifted impatiently above them. They will not wait much longer, he said. Daniel kept his eyes on the ribbon. They waited years to visit her. They can wait 5 minutes now. Soldier moved closer, his shoulder brushing Daniel's knee, and gave a low, steady breath. Daniel untied the blue ribbon. Inside was a folded letter, a small photograph, and a brass token no bigger than a quarter, stamped with the image of a pine tree and the number 13. Mr. Holloway leaned forward. A storage token? Daniel unfolded the letter. Eleanor's voice seemed to rise from the page, thin but warm, as if she were standing beside the old cedar shelves with a teacup in her hand. Daniel, if this has found you, then Soldier remembered what people forgot. I knew he would. Dogs listen with the part of the soul humans are always trying to quiet. Daniel swallowed and read on. Do not let them carry this armoire away from the house until you find the 13th drawer. There are 12 they can count, and 1 they cannot see. Let Soldier lead you. He looked down. 13th drawer, he whispered. Mr. Holloway glanced at the row of drawers. There are only 12. From upstairs, Richard called, I am coming down if nobody answers me. Mr. Holloway turned sharply toward the stairwell. You will remain where you are, Mr. Cross. Daniel placed the photograph on top of the open drawer. It showed Eleanor as a young woman standing beside the same armoire, smiling next to a man in a work shirt. Behind them was a painted sign. Whitcomb, Fine Storage, Harbor Road, Maine. On the back, Eleanor had written, he built the hiding place before they knew what they had lost. Soldier sniffed the photograph once, then walked to the right side of the armoire, where the baseboard met the floor. He pressed his nose into the corner and pawed twice, not hard, just insistently. Daniel crouched and saw what he had missed before. One carved foot was not walnut like the others. It was darker, almost black, with a hairline circle cut into its underside. He held up the brass token. "This is not for a storage locker," he said. "It is a turning key." Mr. Holloway's eyes widened. "You think it fits the furniture?" Daniel slid the token into the circle beneath the foot. It seated perfectly. He turned it left. Nothing. He turned it right. The armoire gave a soft wooden sigh, and the entire bottom rail shifted outward half an inch. Soldier backed up, tail still, watching. Daniel pulled gently. A hidden drawer, shallow and wide, slid from beneath the 12 visible ones. Inside lay a sealed metal tube, a bank key with a red tag, and another note written in Eleanor's careful hand. Mr. Holloway read the tag aloud, barely above a whisper. First Harbor Trust, Private Vault. The ceiling creaked as someone stepped across the parlor upstairs. Daniel picked up the note. It contained only one sentence. The cash was bait, the armoire is the key. Daniel folded the note once, slowly, and placed it back inside the hidden drawer as if the paper itself might bruise. For a moment no one spoke. The basement bulb hummed above them, making the shadows of the armoire stretch across the stone floor like long dark fingers. Mr. Holloway looked from the metal tube to the red-tagged bank key, then to Daniel. "This changes the nature of the inheritance," he said. "No," Daniel replied softly. "It changes what everyone thought they saw." Soldier lowered his nose to the metal tube and sniffed along its sealed edge. His ears twitched twice, then he stepped back and sat, calm now, as if the first part of his duty had been completed. Footsteps came down the stairs before Mr. Holloway could call out. Richard appeared at the bottom, followed by two cousins and Aunt Marlene, her pearl necklace shining against her black dress like a row of small moons. "What is taking so long?" Richard demanded. His eyes landed on the open hidden drawer. The smirk left his face. "What is that?" Mr. Holloway moved in front of the armoire. "A private matter belonging to Daniel." "Private?" Marlene said, her voice turning sweet in the dangerous way Daniel remembered from childhood dinners. "Dear, we are all grieving. There should be no secrets among family." Daniel picked up the bank key. There were plenty of secrets when Aunt Eleanor needed help fixing her roof. Marlene's mouth tightened. "That is unfair." "So was leaving her alone every Thanksgiving," Daniel said. The words were quiet, but they settled hard. Richard pointed at the drawer. "If there is something valuable in there, it came from this house. That makes it part of the estate." Mr. Holloway opened the will folder with crisp patience. The armoire and all contents, visible or concealed, were specifically assigned to Daniel Cross. Mrs. Cross added that sentence in her final amendment. Richard stared at him. "Concealed?" Daniel looked up. "She knew you would laugh before you looked." Soldier stood then, not growling, not threatening, simply placing his body beside Daniel like a wall made of breath and loyalty. Richard took one step closer, then stopped. "That dog always gives me the creeps," he muttered. Daniel rested his hand on Soldier's back. "He only notices what people try to hide." Mr. Holloway turned to Daniel. "We should open the metal tube in my office, with a witness record." "No," Daniel said, looking at the red tag. "The note points to First Harbor Trust. That is where she wanted this opened." Rain tapped harder against the small basement window. Somewhere upstairs, the old house creaked in the wind, patient and watchful. Richard gave a short laugh, but there was no humor left in it. "You think a dusty key makes you rich?" Daniel slid the metal tube into his coat pocket and closed the hidden drawer with care. "I think Aunt Eleanor waited a long time to tell the truth." Mr. Holloway nodded. "Then we go now." As Daniel covered the armoire with the white sheet again, Soldier suddenly turned toward its cracked mirror and gave one soft bark. Daniel followed his gaze. In the cloudy glass, behind their reflections, a faint line of writing had appeared, where the dust had shifted on the mirror's inner edge. It was only 3 words, but they made Mr. Holloway go still. "Trust no one." The words on the mirror did not look freshly written. They looked uncovered, as if they had been waiting beneath years of dust for the right breath to reveal them. Richard leaned forward, his face pale in the basement light. "That could mean anything," he said. Mr. Holloway closed the will folder with a quiet snap. "It means we are leaving." "Not without us," Marlene said. "If Daniel is going to the bank, then family should be present." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Family was present when she needed a ride to the doctor. Marlene looked away. Soldier moved to the stairs first, stopping halfway up to glance back, as if counting who followed. Outside, the rain had turned the driveway silver. Mr. Holloway drove his dark sedan, and Daniel followed in his old blue pickup with Soldier in the passenger seat, the metal tube tucked inside his coat, and the bank key resting in the cup holder, like a small red warning. In the rearview mirror, Daniel saw Richard's black SUV pull out behind them. Soldier gave a low breath through his nose. "I know," Daniel murmured. "They are not done." First Harbor Trust sat on the corner of Main and Willow, a limestone building with brass doors and tall windows glowing warm against the gray afternoon. Inside, the air smelled of waxed floors, paper, and quiet money. A woman at the front desk looked up as they entered. "May I help you?" Mr. Holloway placed his card on the counter. "We need access to a private vault registered under Eleanor Cross." The woman's polite expression shifted at the name. "One moment, please." She disappeared through a frosted glass door. Richard arrived behind them, shaking rain from his coat. "This is absurd," he said. Aunt Eleanor lived like she was counting pennies. Daniel kept his eyes on Soldier, who had turned toward the back hallway, ears lifted. Maybe she was counting people instead. A tall bank manager with silver hair emerged, carrying a leather ledger. "I am Thomas Bell." Mrs. Cross left standing instructions. "Only Daniel Cross, the named attorney, and the dog are permitted beyond this point." Richard blinked. "The dog?" Mr. Bell looked down at Soldier with unexpected gentleness. Her wording was quite clear. The German Shepherd must be present. Soldier wagged his tail once, as if he had understood every word. They entered a private room behind the vault corridor. Mr. Bell set the ledger on the table and unlocked it. "Mrs. Cross updated this file 3 months ago. She said the Armoire would bring the right man here." Daniel placed the red-tagged key beside the metal tube. "Did she say what was inside?" Mr. Bell shook his head. "Only that greed would come wearing black." The door behind them opened before anyone could answer. Richard stepped in, despite the clerk trying to stop him. "I have a right to know what my aunt hid." Soldier stood, silent and firm. Mr. Holloway's voice sharpened. "You have a right to leave before you damage your own claim further." Mr. Bell turned the vault key. From somewhere beyond the wall came a deep mechanical hum, old and patient. Daniel felt the floor tremble faintly beneath his boots. Soldier pressed his paw against the base of the vault door, then looked back at Daniel. The same three-bark signal did not come this time, only one quiet whine, almost sad. Daniel understood. Whatever Eleanor had hidden here was not just valuable. It was going to hurt before it healed. Mr. Bell led them through the vault corridor, where the lights glowed low and gold against rows of steel doors. Each step echoed softly, measured and respectful, as though the building itself had learned to speak in whispers. Daniel walked with Soldier close at his left knee, one hand resting near the dog's harness, the other holding the red-tagged key. Richard followed despite Mr. Holloway's warning, his wet shoes squeaking against the polished floor. "This is family property," Richard muttered. "You keep saying family," Daniel said, "but you only seem to mean property." Mr. Bell stopped at a vault door marked with a small brass plate, E. Cross Private Archive. He inserted his master key, then nodded for Daniel to use Eleanor's. The lock turned with a heavy sound that seemed to come from deep underground. Inside was a narrow room lined with shelves, not cash boxes or gold bars, but canvas document cases, sealed envelopes, framed certificates, and a long cedar chest resting on a table beneath a green banker's lamp. Richard stared in disbelief. "Paper? She dragged us here for paper?" Mr. Holloway's eyes moved across the labels. Land deeds, mineral rights, art provenance files, corporate shares. His voice lowered. "These are not ordinary papers." Daniel set the metal tube on the table. Soldier sniffed the cedar chest, then pawed gently at the latch. "All right, boy," Daniel whispered. "One thing at a time." Mr. Bell handed Daniel a cotton cloth. Mrs. Cross requested that the tube be opened first. Daniel broke the old wax seal and slid out a rolled letter wrapped around a smaller envelope. The first page was addressed to Mr. Holloway. The attorney read silently, and the color drained from his face. "What does it say?" Richard demanded. Mr. Holloway looked at Daniel. "Your aunt documented a transfer of assets that was hidden from her after your uncle died. She spent 50 years rebuilding the records." Richard scoffed, but his voice cracked. "That is impossible." Daniel opened the smaller envelope. Inside was a photograph of Eleanor sitting alone at her kitchen table, older and thinner than he remembered, with Soldier's head resting in her lap. On the back she had written, "He listened when no one else did." Soldier gave a soft whine. Daniel touched the photograph with his thumb, feeling something inside him loosen and ache. Mr. Bell opened the cedar chest. Inside were more files, each arranged with careful labels, paintings held in trust, railroad bonds, coastal acreage, mining royalties, and a sealed appraisal packet from Boston. Mr. Holloway lifted the appraisal with trembling care. "Daniel," he said, barely breathing, "these assets were never part of the cash estate. Richard stepped closer. How much? No one answered. How much? He asked again, sharper. Mr. Holloway looked at the final page, then closed his eyes for a moment. The preliminary valuation is $270 million. The vault room fell silent except for the soft hum of the lamp. Richard gripped the back of a chair as if the floor had shifted beneath him. Daniel did not smile. He looked at the photograph, then at Soldier. She was alone with all of this, he said. Mr. Bell nodded sadly. Not alone, he replied. She said your dog knew where the truth was kept. Richard was the first to speak, but his voice no longer carried the sharpness it had worn in Eleanor's parlor. That cannot all belong to him, he said, staring at the appraisal packet as if the numbers might rearrange themselves out of mercy. Mr. Holloway laid the document flat on the cedar chest. It does, unless a court finds fraud, coercion, or incompetence, and Mrs. Cross anticipated that argument. He opened another envelope and removed a notarized video transcript, medical letters, and 3 signed witness statements. She was evaluated twice. She was fully competent. She also recorded why she made this decision. Daniel looked up slowly. Recorded? Mr. Bell nodded and crossed to a small cabinet built into the wall. From it, he took a slim digital recorder sealed in a clear evidence pouch. She brought this in herself. Said you would not believe the money until you heard the reason. Richard stepped forward. I object to this being played without the entire family present. Mr. Holloway looked at him over his glasses. You are present because Daniel has allowed your interruption to continue. Do not mistake grace for permission. For once, Richard had no answer. Mr. Bell pressed play. Eleanor's voice filled the vault room, fragile but unmistakably clear. Danny, if you are hearing this, then Soldier did his job, and the old armoire kept its promise. Daniel lowered his eyes, and Soldier leaned gently against his leg. The recording continued. Your Uncle Henry discovered what my brothers had hidden after my father died. Land, shares, paintings, royalties, all tucked away behind polite smiles and family dinners. Henry built the armoire with a place for truth, because he knew paper survives where memory is bribed to fail. Marlene, standing near the doorway now, covered her mouth with one gloved hand. Eleanor's voice softened. I spent my life recovering what was taken, but I did not want it going to the loudest hands. I watched all of you. Some wanted comfort, some wanted control. Only Daniel came with nothing to gain. He fixed my steps, he brought soup, he let me talk about Henry without checking the time, and Soldier, dear Soldier, sat beside me as if an old woman still had orders worth hearing. Richard looked down. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his face did not harden. The old anger he might once have carried had been replaced by something heavier and cleaner. I did not choose Daniel because he was poor, Eleanor said. I chose him because he remained kind when life gave him every excuse not to be. The recorder clicked softly, then stopped. No one moved. Mr. Holloway gathered the papers with quiet care. Daniel, there will be legal steps. Tax attorneys, appraisers, trustees. It will not be simple. Daniel looked at the cedar chest, then at the photograph of Eleanor with Soldier. It was never simple for her either. Richard swallowed. Daniel, listen, maybe we can talk as a family. Daniel turned to him, calm and tired. We could have done that while she was alive. The words landed without cruelty, which made them harder to escape. Soldier walked to the vault door and looked back, ready to leave. Daniel slipped Eleanor's photograph into his coat pocket. The money had been revealed, but the miracle had not. That would depend on what he chose to do next. 3 months later, the armoire stood beneath warm lights in the front hall of the Eleanor Cross Veterans' home, its walnut surface cleaned, repaired, and glowing like old honey. Daniel had refused to sell it, even after 3 collectors offered more money than he had ever imagined touching in his life. Some things are not for sale, he told Mr. Holloway when the last offer came through. The attorney had smiled. Your aunt would have liked hearing that. The old house on Maple Ridge had been restored first, not as a mansion, not as a monument to wealth, but as a place with 12 bedrooms, a large kitchen, a workshop, and a fenced field where retired service dogs could run under the pines. The lake lot became a small retreat cabin for veterans who needed quiet more than conversation. The coastal acreage was placed into a trust. The railroad bonds and mineral royalties funded medical care, housing support, and training programs for men and women who had once served and then come home to find the world moving too quickly without them. On the morning the doors opened, a light snow fell over town, soft enough to look like blessing instead of weather. Daniel stood on the porch in a dark wool coat, Soldier sitting proudly at his side, his black harness brushed clean. Richard came late without the others, holding his hat in both hands. He looked older than he had in the vault room, not by years, but by the weight of being forced to see himself clearly. I do not expect anything, Richard said. Daniel looked at him, waiting. Richard swallowed. I came to say I was wrong. About the armoire, about Aunt Eleanor, about you. Soldier watched him in silence. Daniel gave a small nod. She waited a long time for this family to learn how to say that. Richard's eyes shifted toward the front hall, where the armoire stood beside a framed photograph of Eleanor. Can I see it? He asked. Daniel opened the door wider. You can, but you will see more than furniture. Inside, the first residents were already settling in. A gray-haired Navy cook argued cheerfully with a former Army mechanic over how much cinnamon belonged in oatmeal. A woman in a red sweater helped an old Labrador find a blanket near the fireplace. Mr. Bell had donated the banker's lamp from the vault, and it now glowed on a table beside Eleanor's photograph. Under it was a small brass plaque engraved with her words, "Come back, kind, even if the world does not." Richard stood before the armoire for a long time. She really hid all of it here, he asked. Daniel rested a hand on the polished wood. No, she hid the first door here. The rest was hidden in plain sight, in who showed up, in who listened, in who remembered her when there was nothing to gain. Soldier stepped forward and lay down at the base of the armoire, placing his head between his paws with a long, peaceful sigh. Daniel looked down at him and smiled for the first time that day. You finished your mission, buddy. Soldier's tail tapped once against the floor. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering tire tracks, rooftops, and old grudges with the same quiet patience. Daniel turned toward the kitchen, where someone was laughing, where coffee was brewing, where lonely people were beginning to sound less alone. He had not been looking for a fortune. He had not even been looking for a home, but kindness had remembered his name, and it had come back through an old woman's faith, a hidden drawer, and a dog who knew where the truth was waiting. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with friends who might enjoy it too. We would love to know where you are watching from. Tell us your city and country in the comments. More heartfelt and unforgettable hero dog stories are already waiting for you. See you in the next one.